At 8:42 on a Thursday evening, inside a glass-walled garage larger than the apartment where my daughter and I slept, Claire Ellison looked across the hood of her dead 1967 Ferrari and said, "Fix it before the board vote tomorrow, Mr. Whitaker, and maybe your garage survives the week." 12 people heard her say it. Her lawyers, her assistants, 3 Ferrari specialists in spotless white jackets, and Grant Voss, the kind of man who smiled like he had already bought the room before he entered it. My 7-year-old daughter Lily stood beside my toolbox in a thrift store coat, holding our dinner in a brown paper bag, and when Grant glanced at my cracked work boots and said, "I didn't know we were hiring from the tow lot now," the room gave that small, rich laugh people use when they want cruelty to sound harmless. I did not answer him. A man can lose a lot by answering the wrong insult in front of his child. I only set one hand on Lily's shoulder, felt how tight she had gone under my palm, and said, "Stay where you can see me, baby." Then I lifted the Ferrari's engine cover, leaned into the smell of old fuel, warm leather, cold metal, and money, and saw the thing that made every sound in that room disappear. Not the bad ignition coil, not the fresh tool marks on a bracket that should not have been touched. A signature, tiny, half hidden beneath a brown film of oil and dust, scratched into the underside of the coil mount where no owner would ever look and no show mechanic would ever think to clean. Ellison 417. Claire's father's name. Claire stood 6 feet behind me, guarded and beautiful in a white suit that probably cost more than my truck payment, her arms folded like she was holding herself together without letting anyone in that garage notice. Behind her, locked inside a glass cabinet, sat a red leather logbook with worn gold corners, untouched under a small museum light. When I saw that signature, I stopped breathing long enough for Lily to notice. "Daddy," she whispered, and I knew, right then, that this was not just a dead Ferrari, and that if I said the wrong thing out loud, my daughter's home, my garage, and Claire Ellison's father's last truth could all come apart before the board vote tomorrow night. Before I tell you what I did with that signature, do me one favor. If you have ever stood in a room where people measured your worth by your boots, your paycheck, or the dirt under your nails, hit subscribe and stay with me. This story is for the people who get laughed at before anyone gives them a chance to be seen. My name is Owen Whitaker. I was 39 years old that night, a white single dad with a 2-bay garage on the edge of Stanford, a little girl who still believed I could fix anything, and a foreclosure notice folded behind the sun visor of my truck because I did not want Lily seeing it on the kitchen table again. I rebuilt old engines for people rich enough to forget the men who kept their memories running. I listened to machines the way other fathers listen for fever in a child's breathing. That sounds strange until you have spent 20 years learning that metal tells the truth before people do. And that Ferrari was telling me something ugly. I wiped the oil once with my thumb, just enough to see the date more clearly, then covered the signature again before Grant could lean close. Claire noticed. Her eyes narrowed, not with trust, not yet, but with the first small crack in her certainty. Lily looked from my hand to the locked red logbook behind the glass and whispered, "Daddy, why did you hide it?" To understand why that red logbook behind Claire Ellison's glass cabinet bothered me so badly, you have to understand something about men who fix old machines for a living. We do not trust Shine. Shine is for buyers, auctions, charity calendars, and rich men who want to stand beside a car they have never once listened to in the dark. We trust records, oil stains on paper, dates written by tired hands, a mileage note in the margin, a part number circled twice because somebody, somewhere, learned something the hard way and cared enough to leave a warning for the next man. My garage opened every morning at 6:10, not because business was good, but because Lily's school bus came at 7:18, and I needed 1 full hour with the cars before I became breakfast, backpack, hairbrush, permission slip, and father. The place sat between a closed carpet warehouse and a tire shop that never took its Christmas lights down. 2 bays, 1 lift that groaned in cold weather, a coffee maker with a cracked handle. The smell was always the same: brake cleaner, rubber, old cardboard, and the faint sweetness of coolant from something I had not yet found time to fix on my own truck. Lily ate toast on the stool beside my workbench most mornings, her sneakers hooked around the legs, coloring while I laid out tools in straight lines. I gave her the better half of the banana and told her I was not hungry. She always knew I was lying. Kids know the truths adults try to make gentle. On that particular Thursday, the foreclosure notice was still folded behind the sun visor of my F-150, where I had shoved it the night before with hands dirtier than I wanted my daughter to see. The bank had given me 10 days. 10 days to catch up on a note that had been slipping for months. Not because I was lazy, not because I drank it away, not because I did not work, but because old engines do not care about your bills, and rich clients pay late when they know you cannot afford to offend them. Lily found me staring at a 1972 Dino carburetor I had cleaned 3 times already. "Is it sick?" she asked. "No," I said, "just not telling the whole truth yet." She considered that, then slid her drawing across the bench. It was our garage, only she had drawn it with flowers in the windows and no bank envelope taped to the door. I folded it carefully and put it in the top drawer beside my old shop notebooks, the black ones I kept since my mentor taught me that memory was too proud to be trusted. "We don't throw away things people leave for us," I told her. She nodded like that was a rule about paper, not a rule about love. At 9:37, while I was checking Spark on a Mercedes that belonged to a man who had not paid his last invoice, the office phone rang. A Greenwich number. I wiped my hands before I picked it up, because my father used to say a man should sound clean even when he had no money. A woman with a careful voice said, "Mr. Whitaker, I'm calling on behalf of Claire Ellison. We have a Ferrari no one can start, a board deadline tomorrow night, and one condition from MS. Ellison herself." Then she paused just long enough for the whole garage to feel colder. "You're not to ask about the red leather logbook." The woman on the phone said it so cleanly that for a second I thought I had misheard her. "You're not to ask about the red leather logbook. Not the engine, not the ignition system, not the fuel lines. The logbook." I looked across my little office at Lily, who had balanced 2 crayons on top of each other and was trying to make them stand like a bridge, and I felt that old father's arithmetic start working in my chest. 10 days before the bank took the garage. 7 minutes before Lily's bus. One Ferrari no one could start. One rule that made no mechanical sense at all. "If the book has nothing to do with the car," I said, "then nobody should mind me not touching it." There was a pause on the line, long enough for me to hear the soft, filtered silence of whatever rich office she was calling from. "Ms. Ellison wants the car running before the board vote tomorrow night," she said. 3 specialists have failed. 2 from Connecticut, 1 flown in from California. The vehicle is currently at the Ellison estate in Greenwich. If you can diagnose it tonight, she is prepared to discuss compensation sufficient to resolve your current business difficulty. That was how rich people talked about a man's home when they had already looked up his debt. Current business difficulty. I did not beg. I did not ask how she knew. I only looked at Lily's drawing in my top drawer, the one where our garage had flowers instead of bank notices, and said, "I charge for my time whether I fix it or not. And my daughter comes with me until I can get Mrs. Alvarez to pick her up." Another pause. Then, colder, "That is unusual." So I was calling a broke mechanic and telling him which book not to read. The words came out calm, but Lily looked up because children can hear the shape of a room change, even through silence. By 6:30 that evening, I had washed my hands twice and still could not get the black out of the cracked skin around my knuckles. I put on my cleanest gray work shirt, the one with Whitaker Classic stitched over the pocket, packed my timing light, compression gauge, inspection mirror, bore scope, and a small leather roll of tools my mentor had given me before his hands got too stiff to work. Lily sat in the passenger seat of my old F-150 with her knees tucked under her coat, holding the paper bag with 2 ham sandwiches and a bruised apple inside. "Are they nice people?" she asked. I watched the road open toward Greenwich, where the trees got taller, the fences got older, and the houses stopped needing to prove anything. "We'll find out," I told her. "But we're going to be nice people either way." The Ellison gate was black iron and higher than the lift in my shop. A security guard checked my license without looking me in the eye, then glanced at Lily like she was a mistake in the paperwork. The driveway curled past lawns cut so smooth they looked painted, past stone fountains sleeping under winter covers, past a row of cars worth more than every building on my block. My truck sounded louder there. Older, honest in a place that did not seem to value honest things. At the far end of the property stood the garage, 6 glass bays glowing warm against the blue evening, and inside, under white lights, the red Ferrari sat like a wound nobody wanted to name. Claire Ellison was already there. I knew her from magazine covers at tire shops and headlines on customers' phones. But in person she was quieter than I expected, pale hair pinned back, white suit sharp enough to look like armor, eyes tired in a way money could not hide. She looked at my work shirt, then at Lily, then at my toolbox. Not cruel, not kind, measuring. Behind her, inside a locked glass cabinet, I saw the red leather logbook with worn gold corners. Lily saw it too, and for reasons I cannot explain yet, she stopped chewing the corner of her sandwich bag. Grant Voss stepped out from beside the Ferrari with a champagne glass in one hand and a smile that never reached his eyes. "Claire," he said, loud enough for the specialists to hear, "please tell me this isn't the man we're trusting with your father's car." Then every clean jacket in that garage turned toward me. For a few seconds after Grant said that, nobody moved. The clean jackets turned first, then the lawyers, then the assistants with their tablets held against their chests like shields, and finally Claire Ellison herself, standing beside her father's Ferrari as if the car were a witness she did not want called to the stand. I stood there in my gray work shirt with Lily pressed close to my side, my toolbox in one hand, the smell of ham sandwiches and brake cleaner still clinging to us, and the whole glass garage seemed to decide at once that we did not belong inside it. One of the specialists, a tall man with silver hair and gloves, so white they looked surgical, looked at my hands and said, "You work on these often, Mr. Whitaker, or mostly pickup trucks and insurance totals?" Somebody coughed into a laugh. Grant smiled wider. "No offense," he said, which is what people say when offense is the point. "But Richard Ellison's Ferrari has already been examined by men with actual factory credentials. I'm sure Mr. Whitaker is very capable with local work, but this car is not a lawn mower." Lily's fingers found the seam of my sleeve. She did not pull. She just held on hard enough that I could feel each tiny knuckle through the cotton. I looked down and saw her paper dinner bag crumpled against her coat, the apple inside bruising under her grip. That hurt worse than the words. A child can survive seeing her father poor. It is harder when she sees strangers trying to make him small. A security man stepped forward then, not toward me, toward Lily. "Children can wait in the service area," he said. "This floor is for authorized personnel." I set my toolbox down before I answered because I did not trust my hand to stay gentle while holding something heavy. "She stays where I can see her," I said. I leave with my tools." The room went quiet in that expensive way, the kind of quiet that has lawyers behind it. Claire's eyes flicked from me to Lily, then to the red leather logbook locked in the glass cabinet behind her. For one moment, the hard line of her mouth changed. Not soft, not sorry, just less certain. Grant noticed it and moved half a step closer to her, like he could stand between her and whatever she had almost felt. "Claire," he said, smooth as polished stone, "we're not negotiating babysitting arrangements with a mechanic." She did not look at him. She looked at me. "Your daughter may stand by the wall," she said. "She does not touch the car. Neither does anyone who doesn't know what he's doing," one of the specialists muttered. Another small laugh. I nodded once, not because I accepted the insult, but because Lily was watching me decide what kind of man poverty had made me. I knelt, opened my tool roll on the glossy floor, and laid out the inspection mirror, the timing light, the feeler gauge, and the old brass flashlight my mentor had carried for 30 years. The tools looked ugly under those museum lights. Used. Scratched. Honest. Grant stared at them like I had emptied trash on a marble. "Is that supposed to impress us?" he asked. "No," I said. "It's supposed to tell me the truth." That was the first time Claire looked at the tools instead of my shirt. The Ferrari sat 3 feet away, red paint flawless, chrome breathing back the white ceiling lights. Its silence somehow louder than all the rich men in the room. I stepped toward it slowly, waiting for someone to stop me, and Lily whispered, not to them but to herself, "Dad listens first." I heard her. So did Claire. Grant's smile thinned. He reached into his pocket and tossed a key onto the work table with a sharp little clack. "Then listen fast," he said. "The board won't wait for poetry." The key spun once beside my flashlight, and before I even touched the Ferrari, before I opened the engine cover or said another word, I saw the first thing nobody in that room had noticed. The key was new, but the leather fob attached to it was older than Claire's grief. The key stopped spinning beside my old brass flashlight with the leather fob facing up. It was small, dark red once, almost brown now, the edges softened by years of somebody's thumb. Not the kind of fob you buy from a dealership gift counter. Not the kind a valet drops into a drawer. It had been carried, worried, held through bad news. There was a faint impression stamped near the seam. Just two letters nearly rubbed away, R-E, and the thread along one side had been repaired by hand with stitches too uneven for any luxury shop to admit doing. I looked from that fob to the red leather logbook behind the glass cabinet, and the color was not exact, but it was close enough to make the back of my neck tighten. Lily saw me looking. She always did. She stepped half an inch closer to the wall, still obeying Claire's rule, but her eyes stayed on the fob like children's eyes stay on things adults pretend do not matter. "It looks old," she whispered. One of the specialists let out a little breath through his nose. "It is a key ring, Mr. Whitaker. The issue is in the car." Grant lifted his champagne glass. "Maybe we should let him finish his museum tour before the board arrives." I picked up the key carefully, not because it was expensive, but because somebody had used it enough for the leather to remember a hand. "New key," I said. "Old fob." Grant shrugged. The original key was lost years ago. Richard kept sentimental junk. Claire indulged him. Claire's face did not move, but her eyes did. They went to the fob, then to the locked logbook, then back to me. Not trust. Not yet. But the first small question. I did not chase it. A man trying too hard to be believed starts sounding like a liar. I only set the key down, pulled on my work gloves, and said, "I don't need you to believe me. I need you to let the car tell us what happened." The room did not like that. Rich rooms prefer answers that arrive wearing credentials. I opened the Ferrari's engine cover slowly, the hinges giving a soft, expensive sigh, and leaned into a smell I hadn't known since I was 19. Old fuel, hot varnish, aged rubber, aluminum that had seen too many winters, and underneath it all, the stale sharpness of a machine that had been cranked too many times by people listening for the wrong thing. The specialist stood behind me with their arms crossed. Grant checked his watch. Claire stood perfectly still. Lily held the paper dinner bag against her chest like it was something sacred. I did not touch the ignition first. I did not perform. I followed the wire routing with my eyes, then with the back of one finger. The left side coil mount had fresh tool marks along the lower bolt, tiny half-moon scars bright against older metal. Somebody had been there recently and tried to wipe the evidence away. Not enough. Wiped metal never looks like untouched metal. It looks embarrassed. I angled my inspection mirror beneath the bracket. The flashlight beam caught oil dust, a loose fiber from a polishing cloth, and then a scratch that was too straight to be accidental. My breathing changed before my mind caught up. Ellison, 417. Smaller than a shirt button. Hidden on the underside were a judge, a board member, a fiancé in a tailored suit, and 3 factory-certified specialists could stare for a year and never see it. Lily felt it before anyone else. "Daddy," she said very softly, "you got quiet." I turned my wrist just enough to block the mirror from Grant's line of sight. His smile thinned anyway. "Problem?" he asked. I covered the mark with my thumb, not to hide the truth forever, only to keep it from the wrong person for one more minute. Claire saw that too. This time her guard cracked wide enough for something almost like fear to show through. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, her voice lower now, "what did you find?" I looked at the locked red logbook, then at the date beneath my thumb, then at the woman who had spent years mistaking silence for strength. "I need 10 minutes," I said, "and I need to make one phone call to a man who still remembers how your father's generation marked what mattered." Grant's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Grant's glass froze halfway to his mouth because men like him recognize danger before honest people do. Not physical danger. The other kind. The kind that comes when a poor man notices something that was supposed to stay invisible. "A phone call?" he said, and the softness in his voice made it uglier. "Claire, we have board members arriving in less than an hour, and he wants to phone a friend over a scratch." I kept my thumb over the mark. "Not a friend," I said. The man who taught me not to call a scratch until I know why it's there. Claire looked at the Ferrari, then at the locked red logbook behind the glass. Her face was still guarded, but something in her had shifted by a fraction, like a door not opening, only losing the certainty of its lock. 10 minutes, she said. Grant turned to her. That logbook is your father's private property. So is the car, she said. It was the first time all night her voice cut toward him instead of around him. He did not like that. I stepped to the far side of the garage with my phone, close enough to keep Lily in sight. She had moved nearer to the wall, both hands around the paper dinner bag, watching Claire instead of me now. Children do that. They watch the adult who still has a choice. My old mentor answered on the fifth ring, his voice thin with age and midnight television in the background. I did not say Claire's name. I did not say board vote. I gave him the year, the model, the coil mount location, the hand-stamped initials, and the date. For a long moment, there was only breathing on the line. Then he said, if it is marked under the mount, it was meant for the next mechanic, not the owner. I felt the room tilt quietly. What does 4/17 mean? I asked. Could be a service date. Could be a warning. Check the paper record. Men from that era trusted paper more than people. I looked toward the cabinet. Claire had heard enough to go still. Grant had heard enough to move. This is absurd, he said, setting his glass down too hard. He is inventing mystique around routine damage because he knows she is emotional about her father. The word emotional landed sharp. Claire's jaw tightened, but she did not answer him. I hung up and pulled one of my black shop notebooks from my tool bag. Not to show off. To translate. I opened to a page where I had sketched an old Ferrari ignition layout years earlier, with notes about coil brackets, grounding paths, and the kind of failure that looks electrical until you understand it is personal. Lily took one small step forward. Dad writes things down, so he doesn't have to pretend he remembers, she said. The room heard her. Claire heard her most. She crossed to the glass cabinet, entered a code with fingers that did not quite stay steady, and lifted out the red leather logbook. It looked smaller in her hands than it had behind glass. Older too. The gold corners were worn where a thumb had opened it hundreds of times. Grant said her name once, low and warning. She ignored him. When she opened the book, the smell of dry paper and old leather came out like a memory the room had been holding its breath around. The entries were neat, spare, exact. Mileage, oil, valve adjustment, a note about a misfire in cold weather. Then April 17th. The page was there, but the lower half had been cut away with a blade, so clean only the missing weight made it obvious. Claire's eyes dropped to the edge. Her face did not break. That would come later. But the woman who had walked in measuring me by my shirt was suddenly measuring the people around her by their silence. Grant stepped closer. Enough, he said. This man has had his 10 minutes. I closed my notebook. I'm not trying to win a room, I said. I'm trying to make sure the truth gets looked at before someone pays me to miss it. Claire looked from the torn page to the Ferrari, then back to me. Start it, she said, barely above a whisper. Grant's face changed before anyone else's did. I did not move right away after Claire said, start it. That kind of order sounds simple to people who have never had to carry the cost of being wrong. In that garage, with the board members beginning to gather near the glass doors, and Grant watching me like a man waiting for a trap to close, turning that key was not just turning a key. It was putting my name, my garage, and my daughter's sense of the world on the line in front of people who had already decided I was too small to matter. I looked at Lily. She was still by the wall, the brown dinner bag folded under one arm, her eyes on my hands instead of the Ferrari. That steadied me more than any prayer could have. I checked the coil mount one last time, not touching the hidden signature now, only following the fresh scars on the lower bolt to the grounding strap beneath it. There it was. A thin black washer where a copper one should have been, clean enough to be recent, wrong enough to make the whole ignition system lie. The kind of part a careless man misses and a careful man notices. The kind of mistake that does not feel like a mistake. That washer doesn't belong there, one specialist said, too fast, as if speed could make him right. I did not look back. No, I said, it doesn't. I replaced it with an old copper washer from my kit, the sort of cheap thing no one in that room would have bent down to pick up from floor, then cleaned the contact with the edge of a cloth until the metal gave back a dull honest shine. The silence grew thick behind me. Even the glass walls seemed to hold their breath. I slid into the driver's seat, and for 1 second the whole car smelled like another century. Leather warmed by hands long gone, dust trapped in seams, a trace of gasoline like a warning. I set the old fob beside the red leather logbook on the work table where Claire could see both of them together. Then I turned the new key. The Ferrari coughed once. Grant smiled. Then the engine caught. Not loud at first. Low, rough, alive. It rolled through the garage like thunder remembering its own name, and every laugh that had been waiting in that room died before it was born. The specialists stopped pretending to study their shoes. The lawyers stopped whispering. Claire put one hand on the edge of the work table, and for the first time all night, she looked less like a CEO and more like a daughter, hearing her father's voice through a closed door. Lily smiled, just a little, like she was afraid too much happiness might break something. You heard it, she whispered. I did not say I told you so. I did not look at Grant. I only eased the throttle down and listened. Because underneath the engine's return, behind the clean note of the cylinders, there was a small electric click from behind the dash, followed by the soft drop of something opening where no compartment should have been. Claire heard it too. Her eyes moved to mine. I shut the engine off before anyone could call it victory. There's something behind the center panel, I said. The lower half of the cut logbook page was folded inside, yellowed at the edges, held with a brittle strip of tape, and marked in Richard Ellison's same spare hand. Claire reached for it, but Grant moved first. This is enough, he said, and there was no polish left in his voice now. The car runs. Pay him and send him home. The room had not fully understood yet, but it understood him. It understood fear. Claire held the torn page without opening it, her fingers trembling once before she made them still. Grant leaned close to me, smiling for everyone else, and spoke low enough that only I could hear. Your daughter goes to Stanford Academy, doesn't she? Nice little school. Shame what unpaid debts can do to a man's custody story. Then he placed a check on the work table, already signed, large enough to save my garage twice, and pushed it toward my hand. The check lay on the work table between my flashlight and Richard Ellison's torn page, and for one terrible second, I understood how a good man starts bargaining with himself. It was not greed. Greed would have been easier to hate. It was Lily's school shoes with the peeling soles. It was the foreclosure notice behind my truck visor. It was the way my daughter still slept with the hallway light on when she heard me doing math at the kitchen table after midnight. Grant had not offered me money. He had offered me quiet. He had offered me a version of tomorrow where my garage stayed open, my daughter stayed safe, and nobody rich had to admit what had been done in that room. Take it, he said softly, still smiling for the others. You fix a car. That is all you were hired to do. Claire was holding the torn page now, but she had not opened it all the way. Her thumb rested on the old paper like she was afraid the last thing her father left her might cut her. Lily had moved closer without being told, and when I looked at her, she was not looking at the check. She was looking at me. That is the hard part about being a father. Your child does not need to understand the trap to know whether you stepped into it. I could feel every person in that garage waiting for me to become what they expected, a broke mechanic with a price. I picked up the check. Grant's shoulders loosened. Then I folded it once, slowly, and set it under the old leather fob so it would not blow off the table. This can wait, I said. His smile disappeared. Careful, Owen. The way he used my first name made Lily flinch. Men with unpaid notes and minor children should be very careful about how dramatic they become. There it was. Not just my garage now. My right to be seen as fit to raise my own child. The room heard him, but rich rooms are trained to pretend threats are tone. I put one hand in the red logbook, not opening it, just feeling the worn leather under my palm, and thought about all those old entries Richard Ellison had written so the next honest mechanic would not have to guess in the dark. The truth is not for sale, I said, and my daughter is not leverage. It was not loud. It did not need to be. Claire's eyes lifted from the page to Grant, and something in her face changed in a way no apology could have done yet. It was not softness. It was courage trying to stand up inside grief. Grant reached for the torn paper, but Claire stepped back before his fingers touched it. That small step made the whole garage shift. Lily slipped her hand into mine, and I felt her stop shaking. Claire opened the lower half of the page. I did not read over her shoulder. That was a line I would not cross. Her father's last warning belonged to her before it belonged to any board, any lawyer, any poor man who had found it by accident. But I saw enough from where I stood: Grant's initials, a transfer date, a note about the ignition ground, and one sentence in Richard Ellison's tight, spare hand. If the car runs, the trust clause is still alive. Claire went pale. Grant looked toward the glass doors where the board members were waiting. I took my tools off the table one by one, because if I stayed near that check any longer, I might start remembering how badly I needed it. I'll give a written statement about the car, I said. Not about your family, unless MS. Ellison asked me to, and I won't be paid to lie. Claire looked at me, then really looked, as if she had finally understood that I had not protected the signature because I wanted power over her. I had protected it because some truths deserved to arrive with dignity. Grant snapped his fingers at security. Get him out. But before the guards could move, Claire closed the red logbook with both hands and said, in a voice quiet enough to make every lawyer lean in, "No, bring the board inside." When Claire said, "Bring the board inside," nobody moved at first. Not the lawyers, not the specialists, not even Grant. The Ferrari sat cooling behind us, ticking softly in the glass garage, that old engine giving off the warm metal smell of something brought back from the edge, and the red leather logbook lay closed beneath Claire's hands like a heart she had finally decided to stop hiding behind glass. Then one assistant opened the doors, and the board members came in with their coats still on and their faces arranged for business, only to find Richard Ellison's daughter standing beside his newly awakened Ferrari, a poor mechanic's tools on the work table, and Grant Voss looking for the first time like the room had stopped belonging to him. Claire did not make a speech. That mattered. People who are used to power often think the truth has to be dressed up before it can enter a room. She simply opened the logbook, placed the torn lower half against the cut page, and read her father's words out loud in a voice that shook once, then steadied. The trust clause was tied to the car. If the Ferrari could be started with its original ignition path intact, control of the Ellison family voting shares stayed with Claire, not the finance committee Grant had been quietly building around her. The wrong washer, the altered ground, the missing page, the transfer date, his initials beside it all. None of it needed shouting. The silence did the shouting for us. Grant tried to smile through it. Then he tried to call it misunderstanding. Then he looked toward security and found men who suddenly wanted instructions from Claire instead. By the end of that night, the board had suspended him pending an outside investigation. The lawyers had taken custody of the page and the maintenance records, and the Ferrari specialist who had laughed at my tools were studying the floor like it might tell them how to become smaller. I gave my written statement about the car. Only the car. Claire's family grief was not mine to spend. When the papers were signed and the board had gone, she stood in front of me with the red logbook held against her white suit, no longer behind glass, no longer a museum piece. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, and her voice was quiet enough that Lily stepped closer to hear it. "I treated you like a man I could buy because I was afraid to admit I needed a man I could trust. That was wrong. I did not know what to do with an apology that clean, so I nodded." Claire turned to Lily then, not bending too fast, not performing softness for a child, just meeting her eyes like Lily was a person whose judgment mattered. "Your father protected something that belonged to me," she said. Lily slid her hand into mine. "He does that," she whispered. That nearly broke me. Claire paid my invoice before I left, the real one, hours, parts, emergency call-out. No blank check, no hush money. The next morning, her office sent a proper restoration contract for the Ferrari and 3 other family cars. Enough steady work to save my garage without turning my pride into charity. I accepted that. Honest work is not pity. Before we walked out, Claire opened the logbook one last time and placed the old leather fob inside the front cover, where her father's thumb had worn the page smooth. Then she tore Grant's check in half. Not dramatically, not for applause, just because some money carries the smell of a cage. Lily watched the pieces fall into the trash and let out the breath she had been holding all night. Outside, my old F-150 looked even older under the estate lights, but it did not embarrass me. Not anymore. Claire stood by the garage door as Lily climbed in with our untouched sandwiches, and for a moment there was no billionaire CEO, no broke mechanic, no board vote, no dead Ferrari. Just a daughter who had found her father's warning, a little girl who had seen her dad refuse to become cruel, and me, still counting bills, still a mechanic, but seen.